my spiritual director would warn me about this all the time as I was a hermit, because it was a very penitential life. And he would always warn me, he said, Wayne, he goes, that nothing is merited in your life by just gritting your teeth and doing it. It's not by white knuckling things out there that anything's going to happen. Anything that you give up for the Lord has to be motivated by love. And that's what needs to be renewed in our hearts. And I won't, though. So say that I'm just not willing to give up any of these other little pleasures that I have in my life. You might just stay with those and never really experience true intimacy with another human being. And you might be content that way. Okay. But it might not be quite a fulfilling life that you might hope for. And so there are things that, just to pray, I need to give up time doing something else that I might enjoy at that time. And then to condition myself to actually follow Christ, we do give up things that we enjoy in a natural way. So like food or drink or some favorite entertainment. I might try to exercise my soul by giving up something that I enjoy, so that when the temptation comes to do something that's not congruent with what I'm trying to do with following Christ, I'll have the strength then not to do that. But there's all kinds of advice to be careful with there too, because we're not out here to become inhuman. So like, we don't fast by eating no food. We fast. That's starving. And eating no food is starving. Fasting is tempering it, and eating the 2 small meals with 1 major meal with nothing in between. That's fast of the church, and it's a real wise, time-proved way of doing it that will condition your soul not just to go where it wants and when it wants, but to train it for a higher purpose, on it too. So, yeah, I think that we approach penance oftentimes as a negative giving up rather than a positive of what I'm seeking.
Yeah, if I had never moved from Chicago to Steubenville, Ohio, I would never have the life that I have. I mean, I moved from Chicago because of my wife. I met her, we began to date, and I realized if I'm going to further this relationship, I'm going to have to leave the life I know behind, and I'm going to move to this tiny little town in on the edge of Ohio that I didn't really have a great affinity for, and really wasn't all that aesthetically pleasing compared to where it is I moved from. But it changed my life, and I made that sacrifice, and it turns out to be no sacrifice at all, because what I gained in response to that was a life that I would never have had previously. So we'll all make sacrifices for the things that we love. And again, the way we cultivate this love is through just doing the basics of the Catholic life. You're practicing your life of prayer, doing these small mortifications, and getting to Mass as often as you possibly can, getting to confession. And what happens is, and even the desire for mortification works like this: the more you move into relationship with Jesus Christ, the more you desire to do these things. We're people of desire. And so this desire increases, and I begin to want to do these things because my love is growing. That's really the secret. You can't make these things happen. God does it to you. He gives you the grace to be able to do it. But it all comes about through just doing the basics so that the love grows. You mentioned earlier about this whole notion of loving with no self-interest. And I'm assuming that when you said that, some people listening to this are like, how in the world though, Father, how can you have no self-interest in a mutual loving relationship? Like, I can't take myself completely out of it, can I?
That's a good question. That there's a transformation that happens that sees that my greatest good is to be with this person and to be filled by this person. That the great self-emptying of some of the great ascetics in their life, what we call kenosis, a self-emptying. Mother Teresa used to say that, God can't fill what is full. And so I recognize my need to empty myself of these things that are really more about my own personal pleasures than about my ultimate pleasure that I'm coming to experience in God. And St. Augustine will use the image, of having a sack that's filled with vinegar and seeing this great immense of honey that I would like to put into this sack rather than the vinegar. So first I got to get rid of the vinegar and cleanse it. And then I allow that sack to be stretched by God, sometimes allowing nothing much to happen in prayer and my desire for him increasing so that all that honey can fit into this sack, which would be our soul. So in a sense, I talk about Mother Teresa in it, and she's just a very humbling example in all of this. But she talks about the suffering that she's going through, and she says, Lord, if you want me to suffer this my whole life, I will. And then she goes, in fact, if you want me to suffer it for all eternity, for the sake of other souls, I'll do that too.
Wow.
And I tell people I'm not quite there yet. I'm not with that. I'm still kind of sitting there. Heaven better be blessed. This is kind of tough now, but that's the beauty, though, that she really desired him and was consumed by desire for him. And she really lost herself in the midst of it. And we see the beauty that God does through a soul like that. So it inspires us to become more like that. And what can happen when a soul is truly transformed by Christ. There's nothing more beautiful. And that soul, even though they might be going through very deep sufferings, becomes a light for the world, through which Christ is seen very clearly.